that may not make a lot of sense right now, and hopefully when we get to some problems it will. Okay, so compound interest. Now notice there's a plus or minus right here, because compound interest can either work against you or it can work for you, right? And so, well, I guess that's not really the plus or minus. The plus or minus is just if the rate is taking away. So the minus would indicate some kind of, I guess, depreciation in value. You purchase your car, you drive it off the lot, boom, you lose whatever the percentage, like what do they say, 20% or 50%? Right off the bat, right as soon as you drive it off the lot. Okay, so that'd be like a minus thing, that's depreciation. Addition is where you're gaining value, whether it's value that you owe, like a loan, or whether it's value that you gain because it's owed to you in whatever way, right? You put it in some kind of an account that increases its rate, and then it gives you money back, okay? Now, A is the amount after the time, because we see T is, whenever we see T in these equations, it usually represents some form of time. And for compound interest, it's usually calculated in years. If you're looking at some kind of time in months, there's a different formula that you have to use, which we're not going to be dealing with too much. Of course, if we were dealing in months, then you take the number of months and then just divide it by 12. That would be whatever T value you have, because that's how much of a year. That number of months is whatever the number of months it is. Now notice it says the rate has to be expressed as a decimal, right? So the rate, when we look at the rate here, like they said, the rate here is 5%. Okay, we need to remember how to change these percentages into decimals. It's just moving the decimal 2 times to the left. So as a decimal, this would be 0.05. And yes, your calculator will do that for you if you'd like it to. It's got a percentage. It's not a percentage button by itself, but you see just above 8, there's the open parentheses button. Right above that in green is the percentage sign. So to access the percent, like if you wanted 5% as a decimal, you push 5, second, and then open parentheses. And on the screen, you see 5%, just push enter, boom, you get a decimal out of that, okay? So that means that if you're going to use the calculator, technically speaking, you don't necessarily need to change it into a decimal. You can just type it in as a percentage into the calculator. It will know what to do, okay? This is one that generally gets confused because, I don't know, some students aren't familiar with this enough to know what principal is. It's just your starting value, right? When you take out a loan, let's say your loan was for 10 grand, you're gonna buy a fancy new car or whatever. Is that enough to buy a fancy new car these days? I'm way out of it. But that'd be P. Okay, that's P. P is principal. Why is it called principal? I have no idea. Take some kind of economics finance class to figure that out one, but we call it principal, okay? All right, so again, they have to give us, since this formula, see 1, 2, 3, 4 different unknowns, 4 different variables here. If we're gonna be solving for one, they have to at least give us 3 of them. They'll give us 3 at a time. They may say, hey, solve for the rate, solve for the time, solve for the principal. Actually, they probably won't say solve for the time, probably not the rate right now either, just because that's, I may be mistaking myself, but that's a different function. But I think we'll actually cover that later on in this. What is it, 8.5, I think? Let's look at the problem then. Find the final amount of money in an account if $9,400 is deposited at 5% interest, compounded annually, which really just tells us that we're using this formula, and the money is left for 7 years. We'll round the answer to 2 decimal places. Why 2 decimal places? Because that's pennies, because we are looking at some kind of money here, right? All right. So let's identify the values that we have, right? We got this $9,400. That's how much is deposited. That's the starting value. This is a starting amount. I'll write that in. That's a starting amount. And we know from that last slide, when we see some kind of starting amount, that's also known as principal. It's the principal amount. That's the P value in this formula. So in the formula right here, I got this P for principal. I'm going to replace that with the value they gave to us, which was $9,400, okay? All right, so there's that first value. And like I said, you may have to reread these, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, figure out what is what, especially until you get used to what each of the variables represent. Next up, they say it's 5% compounded interest on this one. Okay, so that's interest is the rate on this one. So, like I said, well, I guess we saw 5% already changed to a decimal, so I guess I can maybe skip that. Again, if you're going to be using the calculator to just punch this in, just type in 5%. That's fine. The calculator will know what to do. The last value they gave us, here's the time. That's in 7 years. So that is the exponent t in the formula. T for time, time in years, 7 years. Okay. I've just kind of set this up so I can go back and fill in whatever else was there. Right, you got the parentheses, you got the plus sign, and the 1. Okay, that's what I mean by plug and chug on this. That's all we're doing with these because they're going to give us the formulas. Plug and chug. Take the values that they give you, plug them in, chug it out. Boom. Okay, and this will give us some kind of amount here. And this is the future amount that we would expect to be in the account. Okay, now I recommend just plugging this completely into the calculator. You can do it piecewise if you'd like. You can say, well, 1 plus 0.05 is 1.05. You can raise that to the power of 7, which I guess yeah, you could do that. I'm doing it a little different. Yeah, so this would be, and see this decimal right here. This is super ugly decimal if you ask me, but, and I think it goes on even more than that. Then I would multiply that by 9,400 times by 9,400. Yeah, we get it. It's still a pretty ugly decimal, but 13,226.743. I'll just round that to 74. This is in dollars. This is the amount in the account after 7 years with the 5% interest if you deposit 9,400 bucks. Now, for those of you that have taken either 950 or 920 in the past, or even 900, sometimes they'll talk about interest with what's called simple interest. This is not simple interest. Well, it's kind of a different way to look at simple interest. I'm not going to go into that, though. This is compound interest. You have to be careful not to be using that simple interest stuff, because if you do, you're going to get that. You're going to get these answers off. Okay, $13,226.74 in this account after 7 years at 5% interest. It seems kind of low to me for 7 years, but you can decide for yourself.